All right, that's always a fun intro to get started. Good morning, everybody. Uh, Getting started here with Mr. Todd. Glad to be on our first live stream together.
I know you and I, the first one together, been on two with Matt here, and here we are, kind of talking about kind of a not an exact repeat of yesterday, but kind of a very similar setup with these clusters of storms making their way into and through central Indiana, coming from Illinois.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would say that it's somewhat similar in terms of the overall pattern, but there's a little bit more of a limitation, especially the further east you go, because of all of the rain that's been ongoing this morning and considerable flooding and flash flooding that's been going on throughout the morning hours and the overnight last night across eastern Indiana, northern Kentucky, and parts of western Ohio.
Yeah, the pictures coming out of there and the videos, unbelievable from Newcastle, roads washed out over at Henry County, Wayne County, a lot of high water and those rainfall totals. I had somebody message me over 8 inches in Muncie with the rain totals. And, so they're dealing with flooding on the eastern side of the state. There's travel advisories and warnings, which we'll talk about over there. And you can see some of those rainfall totals there, all those colors in blue, anywhere from 5 to almost 10 inches of rain in spots. And unfortunately, more rain's heading your way on the eastern side of the state, as Brett kind of alluded to earlier. That rain that fell here throughout the morning hours might help you out a little bit as far as the winds go and the severe threat later on this afternoon compared to areas that have remained more dry throughout the overnight hours and here throughout the morning. But even if you don't see the wind and the severe threat, unfortunately, more rain is going to be heading your way as well. Anywhere from Marion to Muncie, even into the Greenfield area, down towards Columbus, and points to the east of the state line into Illinois. And for those of you if we're watching from Ohio, into your area as well.
Yeah, I was showing there the observed rainfall totals over the past 24 and the past 3 hours. I think one of the big issues that these areas are dealing with, past 3 hour observed rainfall, 2.5 inches of rain in some spots just in the past 3 hours. So you have nearly an inch per hour rainfall rate on top of what has already fallen. As we were on the live yesterday, this area saw multiple rounds of heavy rain. And so, as you mentioned, Todd, we've got spots that have 8 to 10 inches of rain just over the past 24 hours or so. And as a result, if we go back to this here, all of these areas shaded in green, flash flood warnings, and a lot of these, in terms of the damage threat, have the considerable tag on them. I'm
Mhm.
actually maybe a little surprised that some of them don't have even the catastrophic tag, based off of some of the
Yeah.
pictures that I've been seeing of roads washed out, and I think we've had some water rescues. So all kinds of issues for folks in the eastern part of the state. Certainly thinking about you all this morning as that rain continues to go through the area.
Yeah, and it's also a good reminder, Brett, to not get out on the roadways if you live in those areas or try to cross flooded roadways. I saw a video of somebody kind of walking through a street that was buckled, and that's something you don't do. And obviously, you don't drive through the high water. You have no idea how deep that water is. And emergency crews are out there, right, trying to restore power, trying to get storm drains cleaned and fixed, and this and that. And so, just if you live in that area and you don't have to get out on the roadways, please don't, and let the crews get out there and the water kind of recede here a little bit, hopefully, as we work our way over the next couple hours.
All right. So, with all of that being said, I did want to take a moment before we get into today's forecast, Todd, of just giving our team a shout out for their performance yesterday in terms of the severe weather outlook. We'll get into today's outlook, but here were all of the verifications. Did officially confirm that this cluster that moved through Iowa into Illinois, northern Indiana, was classified as a derecho. And so, numerous 90 to 100 mile per hour wind reports there, especially from Chicago and points into the northwestern portions of Indiana.
Yeah, 80 to 90, 100 mile per hour wind gusts there in Chicago, and then it kind of dove down here through central Indiana. I got home yesterday and I had some siding off the side of my house, and even you could see my grass was kind of blown sideways, and I've seen a lot of pictures of corn in the fields kind of just blown over as well with these storms. And I had somebody ask me about that as was the derecho or not, and it was classified as you mentioned, Brett. And this next one might not have quite the same punch or same widespread impact across as large of an area as the one did yesterday. But still, there we are once again west of Chicago with a tornado warning that's in place, and all along that line. It doesn't look like completely across the line, but numerous thunderstorm warnings as well from just west of Chicago there all the way back towards Quincy, Illinois.
Yeah, yeah. I'll we'll get back into the storm tracker here in just a moment, but to zoom in on a couple of those warnings right now, these are for 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts. So we are starting to notice, especially the northern part of this cluster here, getting a little bit of its act together. It's interesting because I think that there's the general tendency for this cluster to want to dive south. But I will say, in the immediate short term at least, some of the greatest area of instability is in this corridor through here. And so I think that the core of the system may be the most intense north to start, and then it's going to have the tendency as the cluster as a whole dives further south into the east for those strongest winds to push more into central Illinois and eventually central portions of Indiana. But 70-mile-per-hour wind gusts, a tornado warning on this, as you alluded to, right in some of those same areas. If we put the radar into motion here, we will need to be keeping an eye, especially on the south side of Chicago here over the next hour or so.
Yeah, in those last few frames there, Brett, you can kind of see how it's maybe already starting to take a little more of that southeastward shift there with just the last few frames of that. And that northern part, as you mentioned, it's going to run into northern Indiana and then northeastern portions of the state where we've had a lot of that rain. So the interesting thing is going to see how that behaves once it gets into this air that's really been worked over compared to, as you mentioned, the southern flank of that line of storms where there hasn't been as much rain. And that's why we're kind of expecting that better instability, better dynamics for some strengthening on the southern portion of that line. But yeah, just looking at those velocities there
Yeah,
with the
go back.
storm as you just did, certainly there's a pretty good wall of wind, as you can see there from Rochelle down all the way to Streeter there, and it's going to be heading there into the Morris and the Sandwich area, and eventually, as you work your way towards Joliet, most likely in Kankakee, as we work our way. For those of you in northeastern Illinois and maybe watching us from northwest Indiana, certainly need to be on high alert here over the next hour or so as this starts to continue to make its way eastward for you.
Yeah, I'll put a quick timer on this, and then we will go back to the big one where we look at just how the overall line is going to progress. But for folks up here that dealt with the substantial wins yesterday, here is kind of, I would say, generally the track on this right now. It is moving a little bit more west to east, this particular part of it, but looking to work into northwestern parts of Indiana here within the next hour and a half or so. And so, Joliet, Manhattan, Orland Park once again, New Lenox once again, they were under a tornado warning yesterday, Chicago Heights, and eventually out towards Crown Point over the next hour and a half, going to once again be in line for this 70-mile-per-hour wind gust risk. And again, we do have some of these little notches here along the line that can create those quick spin-up tornadoes, similar to what we saw right across the same region yesterday.
Yeah, we have those tornado warnings out there, and when you kind of get a setup like this, tornado warnings kind of always grab the headline as they rightfully should. But in this specific kind of setup, and same as we went through yesterday, the more widespread impact is going to be kind of that wall of wind and that big gust of wind, 70 to 80 to 100 miles per hour yesterday, at least in spots, as Brett just showed you. 70, 80 mile per hour wind gust currently, with that one making its way through northern Illinois. So while the tornado warnings kind of grab the headline and obviously do cause a lot of damage, with this specific kind of setup, the more widespread reaching impact is going to be the wind. So even if you're not under a tornado warning and you're just under that thunderstorm warning, don't think, oh, it's not going to be quite as bad because I'm not under the tornado warning. Certainly with this setup, anywhere in those thunderstorm warnings, certainly you could get more damage than with an isolated tornado across the area. So do not become complacent by any means.
Yeah, 100% agree. Absolutely. We saw that quite a bit yesterday with the wind up in northwest Indiana. With all that being said, obviously the strongest part right now, kind of on the northern edge, but I do believe that we will continue to see some organization and we'll have the tendency for this cluster as a whole to dive further down to the south and to the east, into a little bit more of that untapped environment, areas that have not, as you alluded to earlier, Todd, have not yet seen the winds and the storms and the rain throughout this week so far. And what I have here timed out is the general evolution that we expect with the core of this cluster as it pushes into Indiana. And certainly, I think upon arrival, especially the further north and west you go, there's going to be the potential for damaging wind gusts, those isolated spin up tornadoes, and heavy rain. Probably a little bit of some hail with this, but I think wind overall the biggest threat once again.
Yeah, without a doubt, wind's going to be the biggest threat. And if you're just joining us here on our Facebook Live, meteorologist Brett Waltz and myself, Todd Clausen, talking to you about the potential, once again, of severe weather. We kind of hinted, or we not hinted, we talked about all the flooding on the eastern side of the state. I see all your comments coming in on the side there in the chat feature, talking about schools being closed over in Henry County. Some of you in Wayne County said you've never seen flooding like this ever within the county. There's Bonnie in Jay County, 3.7 inches of rainfall. And so certainly there's travel advisories. I saw it's supposed to be the first day of school there, and schools were canceled in Henry County. Travel advisories. So don't drive if you don't have to. Certainly with all the flooding that's ongoing across the area there. So we've seen your comments, and certainly feel for you there with all the really, really heavy rainfall. But we also have to turn our attention to what's heading our way once again here, Brett, and that's that line of storms. And Brett has the tracker on there. There's been a lot of questions coming in about specific timing, Indy metro area. And so as Brett zooms in there, you can kind of see as we get into more of your hometowns across the area. And I know a lot of you are asking for specific towns in the chat feature. We can't get to obviously every single one of your communities for you. But when we zoom in like this, it can kind of give you a general idea if you're asking for a specific area. But there's Crawfordsville, about 1:45 potentially for the line of storms. And then as you work your way towards Indianapolis, a little closer to 1:30. Keep in mind, these are estimates. There could be the potential for maybe this to speed up a little bit. But with this kind of setup, you see the storms coming, right? So we're inheriting the storms from Illinois. It's not going to be these pop-ups that catch you by surprise. So certainly with the BAM weather app, you can go to the radar feature. You can see the rain heading towards you, and you'll obviously get the alerts if you have them set up. For those of you in eastern Illinois there, as you work your way over towards some of these towns, in Illinois, Paxton, it looks like a little before 11 o'clock. That's Eastern time, so a little bit sooner with the hour time change for you. And then eventually, as you work your way into Indiana, there, Attica, just shortly after the noon hour. So really, as we get, Brett, into, I would say, especially for those of you watching us in Indiana, anywhere from the noon, let's even push it back for northwestern portions of the state. Let's say anywhere from 11 o'clock through about 1 to 2 o'clock at the metro area for Indianapolis, and then further off to the east would be your time frame of the strongest part of the winds making their way through. And then obviously we have the rain and the flooding concerns as well.
Yeah, generally here, I would say this is about 1 o'clock, let's say, roughly. This
Yep.
is a rough drawing here. That's about 1 o'clock. And then I would say 2 o'clock is going to be kind of just south of the metro area or just south of downtown Indy. So kind of through here. So you can see the timer is going to be about 1:30 for Indianapolis based off of the latest speed. Now, as we saw yesterday, as these clusters evolve, we can see it speed up a little bit, slow down a little bit as it weakens. So it's something where we are going to be consistently monitoring it as we go throughout the rest of the morning hours and the early afternoon. And it's where the Nowcast feature in the BAM weather app is really going to come into play. And I wanted to take a moment to direct folks to scan the QR code there in the top right to get those Nowcast updates with more precise timing details as these storms get closer. We will do some more localized nowcast for areas that may have destructive thunderstorm warnings, that may have tornado warnings. We'll do more localized nowcast to time those out for you. And so, yeah, scan that QR code in the top right, bamweather.com/sign up. We do have a 20% off discount through the end of today only for the home subscription. So, good opportunity for that.
Yeah, so let's go over. We've been kind of showing you what's happening right now, and we had the storm tracker on there. But Brett, if we could, you and I were talking about, and you have it all set up. You did all the legwork on this before the Facebook Live. Let's kind of show our thinking of how this line's going to evolve as it makes its way into central Indiana, and why we kind of think as time progresses that the threat might shift a little further to the south for at least the stronger wind action compared to where it is right now in the northern part of that storm as it's moving through Illinois.
Yeah, and I want to make a note right off the bat. As we talked a lot about yesterday, there's really not a piece of model guidance right now that's doing a fantastic job. And so we've gone through and we've analyzed everything. We've looked at current radar. We timed it out for you all first because we felt like that was the best way to give you the most precise details. But I know a lot of you like to have a visual. I like to have a visual as well. And this model, I think, is doing the best job in terms of what radar is going to look like. Maybe a little bit aggressive with some of the leading edge stuff up near Kokomo, further to the north and to the west. But in terms of the main line, it's doing a good job. However, it's running probably 3 hours too slow, but it is doing a good job. And so, as this works into central Indiana, I'll try to give you some time frames as a reference. But I like that to start. Note how the northern portion is rather intense. But what starts to happen as it approaches Indianapolis is the most intense part of the line starts to shift a little bit further to the south. And you can see how this activity north and east starts to weaken a little bit. Certainly still rain, don't get me wrong there. And I know a lot of you all in that region do not probably want more rain because of what's been ongoing throughout this morning. Certainly do not need more rain in eastern Indiana. But I think that ultimately, because of that rain ongoing, this will end up being where the strongest storms start to shift with time, with this cluster diving south into the east. But certainly, Indianapolis, Bloomington, Terre Haute going to all be at play as we head towards that 1 to 2 p.m. time frame for strong to severe storms moving through the area, with wind gusts being the predominant risk.
Yeah, and that rain is, as you mentioned, something we don't need there in northern and eastern communities. So you may not have to worry about the wind, but unfortunately, you're going to have to potentially worry about more heavy rainfall making your way from Kokomo all the way over to Jay County and then south into Muncie, Newcastle, into portions of Wayne County as well, and then even further south down towards Cincinnati. So, hopefully the waters recede a little bit on there to the east before we get the next round of rain. But yeah, for those of you, I would say from Indianapolis to Bloomington, even eventually down towards the Evansville area, you're probably going to have the higher threat, as Brett alluded to, for the stronger wind gust and maybe a quick spin up tornado in there as well, as that storm system makes its way off towards the southeast. And it kind of in the last few frames there, it blossomed a little bit because, again, you haven't seen your atmosphere worked over from all that heavy rainfall this morning like northern and eastern locations have. So that entire corridor there from about 2 to 3 o'clock and then eventually 4 o'clock for those of you down closer to the Ohio River and then into Cincinnati. And for those of you over towards the Columbus, Ohio area, Columbus probably not going to see the stronger parts of the storms
Sure.
like you did
Yeah.
yesterday. I mean, the video is coming out of Columbus, Ohio yesterday with that car flipping over on the interstate. And,
Yeah.
Ohio State University had some damage as well. But certainly Louisville to Cincinnati there in that 4 o'clock-ish time frame. For those of you watching from those locations, certainly will have the chance again, some very, very strong winds and a lot of heavy rainfall and lightning within this line as it makes its way through.
Yeah, real quick, I want to hop back to the radar for a second because we do have a, PDS flash flood emergency, a particularly dangerous situation in terms of a flash flood emergency in Muncie. This is categorized as flash flood damage threat as catastrophic.
Yeah.
So I do want to jump back to this real quick because would be an extremely life-threatening situation. Let's pull this up and read this. Life-threatening flash flooding of low water crossing small creeks and streams, urban areas, highways, streets, and underpasses. 3 to 6 inches of rain have already fallen there, and continuing to see rainfall rates of a half an inch to over 1 inch per hour. So, an extremely dangerous situation there in Muncie right now with that flash flood emergency. So, certainly if you were in a flood prone area, especially near any of those areas that often do experience flooding, this is even beyond what you are normally going to see. Need to be getting to high ground and avoiding all of those areas.
Yeah, and you can see it says right in there, emergency management reports. So that's confirmed by emergency managers in the Delaware County, the Muncie area. So that's not radar indicated or anything like that. That is confirmed. You see it goes till 4:15 Eastern time, and that is in the time frame where you're going to get another round of potentially some heavy rainfall with this next line of storms that's coming through here this afternoon. So unfortunately, the flooding situation probably not going to get much better, whether it's in Muncie or anywhere from Newcastle to Richmond, again on the eastern side of the state of Indiana.
Yep, absolutely. And again, there's a new flash flood warning there in Hamilton, Ohio as well. Pretty much the entire east central and southeast part of Indiana right now, northeast Kentucky and western Ohio, under those flash flood warnings. And again, wanted to specifically highlight Muncie there because they did add that particularly dangerous situation warning tag on that flash flood warning there. So that is something we will be continuing to eye. I certainly do not want to downplay that because that is just as impactful, if not more impactful, than the severe weather that's coming right now.
Yeah, and flooding kills more people in the United States than, tornadoes and lightning combined. So
Yeah.
even though flooding doesn't always, get the headlines, so to speak, and flooding doesn't cause the storm to be severe, but obviously can be a product of heavy rain and severe weather. Just don't get on the roadways if you don't have to. Just,
Yeah.
stay home, especially look at that band of heavy rain there from Kokomo through Muncie down to Newcastle once again this morning or currently, and it's just slowly shifting off towards the east, even down into Connorsville, and there's that real heavy cell south of Rushville as well. And this is just slowly making its way off to the east, and unfortunately, more rain heading that way later on this afternoon. So we continue to see a lot of your comments here. We apologize that we can't get to every single one of them in all your specific towns. But this is just one of those days once again here across central Indiana. You just need to be weather aware no matter where you are. And you all may see different kinds of impacts, whether it's heavy rain and flooding. Some of you may not have as much in the way of heavy rainfall in your community, but you're going to get the really, really strong winds and the lightning once again as we get into the afternoon hours. So really, no matter where you are across eastern Illinois, the entire state of Indiana, and then as you work your way into western Illinois, northern parts of Kentucky, as this next line of storms comes through this afternoon, you definitely need to be weather aware. Make sure you stick with BAM Weather. We'll be doing another live, most likely, here later on this afternoon. As these storms start to make their way into and through central Indiana. But flooding concerns, and then eventually, Brett, once again, as those storms in Illinois make their way into Indiana, we'll continue the flooding threat, but then we'll throw back in the threat of some wind damage and some very strong winds.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll get back just in a moment, guys, to the timing because I continue to see some questions about that. But Hope did just send me this, Todd, from the city of Muncie. Evacuations are now occurring for the following areas in Muncie: Madison Street east to Hackley Street, and Memorial Drive south to 18th Street. Muncie Fire Department going door to door to assist residents in safely evacuating the affected homes in those areas. So, certainly continuing to think about folks there with, as you mentioned, more rain, more heavy rain streaming in, only going to make the situation worse over the next hour or two.
Yeah, it's tough to just listen to that and hear it. And flooding is just one of those things, right? That it doesn't go away. You get
Yeah.
the wind gusts. They happen pretty quick. You can kind of get out and assess damage, but flooding, always tends to be an ongoing thing. And just hearing about those rescues that are happening up there in Delaware County, and you just feel for them. We've all dealt with some sort of flooding. It seems like here across the state of Indiana at some point in our lives, and it's never easy to hear or see that happening. And that rain just continues, unfortunately, to come down there through Delaware County, back up into Howard County, the Kokomo area, down into Henry County, and shifting into western portions of Wayne County there as well.
Yep, kind of right through this corridor is where that stream is happening right now. So certainly we'll be continuing to keep an eye on that for folks in there. Let's finish up kind of the analysis here as we look at this cluster as it moves through. Wanted to draw kind of the 1 p.m. line through here further to the northwest. So very generalized idea here, guys. Again, we will be consistently timing out more specific details on this on the BAM Weather app as we go throughout the rest of the afternoon. But this is kind of the general idea of what we are expecting. Now, I would say that I think from an intensity standpoint, the upper end potential is not as high as it was yesterday.
Yeah.
I'm going to pull up real quick. This is the map that Jake Wagner made this morning, and I think it shows a pretty good depiction of that. The orange area, that's right where right now the greatest instability is and where those 70 plus mile per hour wind gusts are and where the tornado warning is. So I think that's probably verifying pretty well to start out. Note how that yellow area, the possible severe storms, 55 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts, note how that really hits a wall in eastern Indiana. And that's because of all that rain that's there right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Yesterday, if you looked at the risk map with the enhanced risk and the slight risk, it kind of went all the way through the state of Indiana into Ohio and into portions of Kentucky. And Jacob did a great job with this, and it really shows how quickly the threat level will diminish as far as the severe threat goes into those areas right now that are dealing with the flooding. Now, while you may not deal with the winds, unfortunately, you're going to have more rain, but it really kind of depicts what Brett and I were talking about, and Brett was showing you how we're expecting the southern flank of that line of storms that's currently in Illinois to kind of dive to the south. So places from Indianapolis to Martinsville to Bloomington, all the way down into like Tell City, into the Evansville area. That's the kind of area we're expecting the stronger winds to be later on this afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely. Real quick, I did see a new severe thunderstorm warning just pop in. That includes downtown Chicago metro area from Evanston to Hammond, Indiana, basically. That is for 60 mile per hour wind gusts. It does still have the tornado possible detection on it, so we'll need to continue to monitor for some spin ups there. But again, guys, here's kind of a general idea for timing right now. We'll need to continue to keep an eye on the speed of this. I will say from some of the scans I'm seeing right now, I would say overall maybe it's lining up pretty well with the timing that I have lined up here. I was wondering if maybe the south side of this that isn't as strong was slowing a bit, but I think overall this gives a pretty good depiction of the timing across central parts of Indiana. But with that being said, why don't we take a couple of questions and then we can wrap this up, and we'll hop back on as they start to approach the area.
Yeah, and I just looked at SPC, the Storm Prediction Center, and there's a good possibility. It looks like the severe thunderstorm watch, Brett, will be extended at least into western portions of Indiana, as you would expect here, over the next hour or so as those storms get a little bit closer.
Yeah. Somebody's asking, Brandon, are you asking about observed rainfall so far or future radar? I can pull up both, but just curious what you were looking for. Here is this includes some of what has already fallen. Basically, this is 8 a.m. to 8 a.m. tomorrow, to give you an idea. And you can see this is probably a little bit too far west in terms of where the model has the placement. It's probably more towards Muncie and Marion, but this gives you a general idea of how much rain is going to be able to be produced with ongoing storms and future storms. And we've already seen reports of 8 to 10 inches. And so this combines a little bit of what's already fallen, but still additional heavy rain on the table, especially in eastern Indiana. And I'll see if I can pull up here. Here's kind of wave 2. So this gives an idea of what this wave as we work into this afternoon is going to produce. Certainly some streaks, I think, of locally 1 to 2 inches of rain going to be on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. Which, 1 to 2 inches, it doesn't sound like much compared to what a lot of locations just went through. But when you have that much rain on the ground already, 1 to 2 inches in a fairly short period of time is not going to help any situation as far
Yep.
as flooding goes.
Absolutely. Columbus, Indiana, you will need to be watching this cluster of storms as it pushes south. You're probably just far enough east to start to see some of those storms weakening as they approach. But we'll need to watch for some strong wind gusts for sure, I think, for Columbus, probably 3 p.m. or so this afternoon. All right. You're welcome, Brandon. Let's see here. LaPorte, Indiana, we'll need to be keeping an eye on these storms as they work into northern Indiana here. I think that the worst of them are going to miss just south of you today, but I do think you could be clipped by the northern edge up near DeKalb right now. Probably will end up in a strong storm statement or a severe thunderstorm warning for 60-mile-per-hour winds. I think as this moves towards LaPorte, probably closer to 12:30 or so.
Yeah, if you don't mind, Brett, just give us the big view of the current radar, just
Sure.
kind of expand it out there. So a lot of questions just coming in about, specific communities here once again, as far as Richmond goes. So what you're looking at right now is the current radar. You see the heavy rainfall, and then all those green county outlines there are flood warnings and flash flood warnings that are ongoing on the eastern side of Indiana. What you see in Illinois is incoming into eastern Illinois and central Illinois, and eventually here into the state of Indiana. You have a thunderstorm warning that it goes right up to the state line there in northwest Indiana, up towards Gary. And what we're expecting is everybody is going to start to get the storm threat in Indiana as we work our way into the afternoon hours, say anywhere from noon to 4, northwest to southeast across the state. So no matter where you're watching us from here this morning, you're likely going to get into the heavy rainfall. We're expecting the stronger winds again to kind of make their way into southern portions of the state. So kind of think of it this way a little bit. If you've seen and are dealing with the flooding, you'll have rainfall once again, but probably not as much in the way of wind. For those of you watching that haven't seen as much in the way of rainfall here overnight or throughout the morning hours, you're also going to get the heavy rainfall, but you'll kind of have the better potential of seeing the strong winds. So I know that didn't break it down into specific communities, but kind of broke it down for you in the aspect of if you've seen the heavy rain, more rain's on the way, not as much in the way of wind. If you haven't seen the heavy rainfall, you have the higher potential of wind damage here with these thunderstorms as they move through this afternoon.
Yeah, and I'll kind of draw that out here. So I would say this corridor here, especially from a wind perspective, you could probably include downtown Indy in that. Indy's been on the
Yeah.
edge.
Yeah.
What else is new, right?
Right.
Indy has been on the edge of the strong storms and the heavier rain east, but red circled area where this cluster dives is probably your better chance for severe weather, and then the heavy rain will limit some of that to the east, but flooding concerns.
Yeah, Brandon, Todd, or Brett, would you rather have heavy rain or heavy snow? I'm on the snow bandwagon all day long.
Yeah, there's nothing good about heavy rain.
Yeah.
Flooding rain, it doesn't help anyone.
Yeah.
A nice steady rain would be good for the grass for I'm sure some people in southwestern parts of the Ohio Valley. But yeah, give me a foot of snow over a foot of rain any day of the week. All right. All right, guys. Well, with that being said, I think we will probably go ahead and wrap this up here. I appreciate you all hopping on. Again, we will continue to be monitoring this as it moves closer to the area over the next couple of hours. And of course, we will be continuing to send out severe weather and flooding nowcasts on the app as we go throughout the rest of the morning and, of course, the rest of the day, and just always for those of you that are in the areas being impacted.
All right. Take
All
care,
right, guys.
everybody.
Yep. Thank you all. Have a great day.